Needs assessment, Vallejo Police Department, implicit bias and training. Purpose. The purpose of this needs assessment is to explore implicit biases and trainings in the Vallejo Police Department. This agency has one of the highest rates of police lethal and non-lethal shootings, although located in a reasonably small city. The city of Vallejo has awarded millions of dollars in settlements stemming from officer misconduct and excessive use of force. This needs assessment aims to look at the training officers receive on implicit bias and the implementation of its practices. Data collection. I was forced to adjust the agencies and find new interviewees. First amongst them is a civil rights attorney who is actively suing several police departments in Northern California for serious police misconduct and civil rights violations. Secondly, I was able to contact a licensed clinical social worker for Solano County Behavioral Health. This individual is part of a mobile crisis unit who responds to mental health and other nonviolent crises in Solano County, oftentimes with law enforcement. I was also able to reach a local probation supervisor who I felt could provide a law enforcement perspective on implicit biases and mandatory trainings. Key findings. Do you feel there is a current problem with implicit biases and inadequate training for Vallejo police officers? The theme resulting from this question was not in the trainings themselves, but the implementation and oversight thereafter. Law enforcement agencies do provide training on implicit biases, but leadership buy-in is a must. What would the perfect police department look like? A perfect police department would resemble the community it serves with both ethnic and gender equality. In addition, law enforcement agencies will work interconnectedly with community-based organizations to adequately serve the community. Transparency is key to a good department while deconstructing the us versus me mentality. Do you believe de-escalation is the key to reduce negative police interactions? De-escalation training is important because of the multifaceted nature of their job, but not the only solution to proper policing. It is also important to have a multidisciplinary team of trained professionals to respond to crises. Should officers be held accountable for excessive uses of force and unjustified police shootings? All three interviewees were in absolute agreement that police officers should be held accountable for their actions. Officers should be held accountable for their trainings, like social workers and lawyers have governing boards to hold them accountable. One interviewee suggested each officer carry malpractice insurance to ensure quality of work. Should police departments be financially liable for settlements and misconduct? All agreed that any agency is responsible for the work of the employees, but the police departments are an arm of the city, so ultimately the city is responsible when being sued. The social worker displayed caution, stating that departments would harbor misconduct in order to avoid lawsuits. They did all agree that taxpayers shouldn't be the one to pay. Should police officers be required to have higher education degrees? Responses were mixed here as well. The attorney believed that a bachelor's degree should be a minimum requirement. The probation officer responded that it depends on the location, as it may hinder local applicants. And the social worker stated there should be a degree preference with other cultural and work experiences equally applied. Should police departments adopt affirmative action in the hiring process? All the respondents were in agreement that police departments should reflect the demographics of the community. Diversifying the hiring committee will lead to affirmative action in hiring. Should officers be required to live in or near the city they are employed? So the social worker and probation supervisor agree that people behave differently when they are connected to the community. The lawyer felt officers ultimately shouldn't have to live, but should come from diverse communities if they are not local. Why do you want to work in the city you do? When the interviews were asked, they all cited due to demographics, they lacked the proximity of their job and working amongst the constituents of the community. They were all of gender pronouns she, her, and hers. The lawyer has been practicing law for 8 years, social worker for 5 years, and probation supervisor for 22 years, obtaining a Juris Doctorate, a master's in clinical psychology, and a master's of social work. The challenges of working with law enforcement agencies is the lack of keeping and sharing documentation of bad conduct cases. They can be mistrustful in new agency partners and ostracizing staff who go against the normative bad behaviors. The strength of working with and in law enforcement agencies is that they are constantly trained whereas other professionals are done after schooling in the hiring process. The only recommendations were made to local and national trainings were more accessible and increase the amount and duration of trainings. Continued training is needed throughout the year, and institutionalizing the departments and staff should be sent to trainings to improve their duties. The plan of action is an immediate intervention action plan would be to implement an oversight committee that Vallejo police officer trainings is implemented in the field. Currently, there are 3 different individuals from different professional backgrounds saying that officers do receive training, but there is a lack of supervision. While not easily defined, the concept of de-escalation must be ingrained in organizational culture and requires the integration of policy training and supervision. This committee would also ensure that police officers are held accountable for their actions and that progressive discipline was being implemented. Another immediate intervention would be to diversify the police department. Marginalized groups in society often view a government institution as legitimate and impartial when racial composition of the institution mirrors the population it provides services to. I believe that a mobile crisis unit is key here for our local department, and there was inadequate results to show that higher education degrees would improve the way officers operate. My reflection is the key factor that made my needs assessment successful were the findings on the educational piece. I thought that was important, as I always thought police departments should have a minimal requirement for education, but I hadn't considered how it would exclude some local applicants as well. The data did support diversifying police staff, and that was really enlightening as well. What hindered this process was the people being inaccessible when it came down to interviewing. I do plan to address some of these barriers at the next city council meeting, especially around the Vallejo Police Department being unavailable to be interviewed when it came down to. I really enjoyed the assignment and the knowledge gained from the process. I learned not to judge people based on appearance, as I was pleasantly surprised by some of the answers that the interviewees did provide. And not only did the Vallejo Police Department fail to respond, the first law enforcement officer I reached did not want to answer my questions. So I felt it just kind of hard sometimes to reach people and find people who are willing to speak out around these police issues. So that's my reflection on this important process. These are my references. Thank you.